Hello, so here is a video to help you revise for the exam, and this is the section Challenges for French speakers. In here you have a couple of words that might be very difficult for French learners, and you try and anticipate their difficulties. So for the first thing I had in mind was concerned the words gnarled and knocked. So you can group them together. This is the first skill, is grouping words that have the same that include the same challenges for French speakers. And then, the topic is, of course, silent consonants. And some of the French speakers, you could say that you expect the French learners to pronounce the K in knocked. They might say knocked. So you can transcribe that, IPA. And gnarled, they might pronounce it gnarled. Because in French we can say gnome, and in English they say gnome, pour un gnome, even though they write it with a G. So there might be some interferences between the French language, their first language, or at least one of their main languages, and the English language. And then you suggest the right pronunciation. You say that they shouldn't be pronounced, and then you say you're trying to find ways to help them with that as a teacher. So, for example, on the board when you write the word down and you try and help or correct a student, you can hide it with your hand or like a little card or something on the board. And in the trace écrite, you can either just cross the consonant out or use parentheses, depending on what you'd like to do. So you can mention that. So you say, identify a difficulty, anticipate the kind of pronunciation that French learners of English are likely to use and to resort to, and then say the right pronunciation, or at least the ones that we tend to teach at secondary school in France, and then what you'd like to do and how you want to help them with the trace écrite and also while correcting them. Okay, that's it. Number 2 is the word sheet, and since in French you don't have a vowel length distinction, this is a key word, no vowel length distinction in French, well, not anymore, you can say that you expect a lack of distinction between a shorter I, as in shit, and the long one in sheet, with a tense vowel. And so to help them with that, you can use an elastic or just use your scarf and extend your scarf. That was folded in half, and then you just extend it and say sheet as you spread your scarf out. And you can also use articulatory methodology, which is don't do anything with your hands, but just smile and grin and kind of and this should also help them, or at least you can say, if they don't get it, you can say don't grin and extend your scarf or your elastic. In the trace écrite, you can just write lots of E or I's, I, very long, because in the kind of text messages conventions, sometimes they use longer. They repeat the same grapheme over and over again to indicate some kind of emotion and make it sound longer. So they know that kind of convention, so you can use it, and then gradually, because they're going to be bored, they're not going to be very happy to write down lots of I's like that, you can suggest an easier way and tell them, okay, well, let's be lazy and use IPA. And just use the double dots. And I tend to tell the students that just for them to remember that these double dots or colon are a bit like a tattoo. So a tattoo remains on your skin for a very long time. That's it for word number 2. And then word number 3 has lots of interesting elements there. So you expect in change, you can say that since in French we have change, we don't have an affricate at the beginning. We have a sh instead of a ch. And at the end we have a je instead of a j. So you can expect some students to pronounce it that way. But the most common pronunciation is, it's not really, there are very few issues with these consonants, but mostly with the face vowel, so the diphthong in change. Even though in the north of England they might say change, so you can tell them, okay, you're speaking like somebody from the north, which is also very good. But if you want, you can actually try and pronounce a diphthong there. So you can write that you expect a monophthong e instead of diphthong a. So if I use square brackets, it means some kind of a reality, something that you've heard from a speaker and you're not necessarily expecting that kind of pronunciation. And a in between slashes indicates some kind of standards that you expect. And slightly more advanced students might say it's change, so with a y, super, and something that sounds more like a yod, a, instead of change, a bit like an change. But that's pretty good already. But to help them with that one, you can ask them to imagine, think about the word abeille, or use the word that they know, like table. And you can create a chart with an image, a picture of a table, and tell them to say table, and you feel your tongue being squished in between your teeth. And this is the kind of feeling when you pronounce the end of the diphthong, table. Yeah. So that's another possibility. So underneath the word change in your trace écrite, for example, you can just write down a little word like the word table, and the IPA underneath. And then gradually get rid of the word table, just add the IPA. And they'll know. Next one is tomato. Tomato, you expect two things. You expect a stress shift. So they might have some kind of a tomato. So have a stress at the beginning, and they'll have a stress at the end. Whereas, in British English we expect, and in American English we expect tomato or tomato. So maybe here you can already mention the fact that there are differences between the American accent and the British accent, because they are pretty much aware that these two accents are different, but they generally don't really know where and how it works. So it's quite interesting to maybe tell them about it. So an R or an A. But if you don't really want to go into details with that, you can always focus on stress shift. And so this is actually what I really wanted you to focus on. It's tomato, or tomato. So for stress, to help them with stress, you can just use capital letters, because they also use that in their text messages to make a syllable or a word sound louder in written speech, as if you were reading it out loud. So that's it for stress shift. So you tell them, okay, in the trace écrite, you might want to use either capital letters, or you might want to use a square around it, or a stress, and then gradually you can actually make them write it like that way. Tomato. And so they'll kind of help them already up here, and they'll know exactly after a while that this little comma apostrophe indicates the primary stress on the syllable that follows it. You have to make sure that they know. So maybe you make a transition between use a transition, so with capital letters and then the apostrophe. And then that's it. That's it for this video on challenges for French speakers. There are many more elements that we can talk about, but here are the main things that I wanted you to remember. So, silent consonants, be careful on the board, try and find ways to hide it, or at least make sure that it's still visible, because otherwise they might not write it down at all. So maybe just make them write it down and cross it out, or in between parentheses. Next one is no vowel length distinction, so use an elastic and exaggerate the sound, or use some kind of pretend you're extending something, or and grin, if you like, for the E sound. A few, okay. Let's a table. Yeah, and then there's monophthongizations that are quite common among French learners of English. And this is why some people have, more or less jokingly, suggested that maybe the Scottish English or Irish English might be more suitable for French learners of English, because they use monophthongs as well. So instead of saying change, they might say change, table might say table, or at least in Newcastle they would say table with a light L. And in French, they tend to use a light L in coda of a syllable as well, which is not the case for British English, where they have a dark L, and in American English they have most of the time dark L's everywhere. And then next one is stress shift. So stress shift, the students will not really necessarily know where to put the stress. So generally it's at the end, but also at the beginning, because in French when we use emphasis we tend to put stress on the first syllable. They might even have a rising intonation. Tomato, c'est bon madame, ici tu vas être prononciation. So there's also the intonation involved as well in that, in those transfers, language transfers. But let's stop it there. Let's stop there and call it an end. Bye bye. Thank you very much.